All right, friends. I think we should start the webinar. The webinar was scheduled at 5 o'clock, so I would be hereby starting the webinar. A warm good evening to all of you, to all the ladies and gentlemen who have actually, took out the time to come and attend this very interesting webinar on prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. My name is Advocate Abhishek Upadhyay, and I am a senior legal counsel, and I'm practicing with the Bombay High Court. And this is the second time that we are collaborating with Legal Views. And let me tell you that I'm really touched by the hospitality that they have shown to me, and I'm equally touched that the young students who are the future backbone of our country and the working professionals who would be employed as directors, managers in the future, they have actually taken out this time and come to attend and understand and analyze this delicate issue of prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. So when I start this webinar, I would like to start by giving you some very interesting statistics. If you see, of the total Indian population that is working, 48% of that comprises of women. And it would be very shocking for all of you to know that 53% of these women have faced some kind of sexual harassment in the form of jokes, in the form of gestures, in the form of, passing lewd or vulgar comments. 53% of that women have faced sexual harassment of some form. So that is when I come to the awareness and sensitization part, wherein it is right now the need of the hour to basically be aware and sensitized about sexual harassment at workplace. So now this sort of awareness is not only necessary from the side of the employees. This sort of awareness is also necessary from the side of the company as well. The company needs to be aware that what are the internal complaint mechanisms, what are the other procedures that need to be followed under this act, what are the other rights and responsibilities, what are the liabilities of the employers. Because in lot of cases that I have handled, I've seen that the employer has just created an internal complaints mechanism for the namesake, and the functioning is not very proper. Also, I would like to say that there needs to be some kind of awareness and sensitization from the side of the judiciary. Now, why I say this is because now this act was enacted in the year 2013. It's a fairly new act. It is just 7 years old, and it is not, compatible or capable, you can say, to handle the complex issues that go on in a working environment. They have definitely given the provision of a internal complaint mechanism, but there are no provisions to analyze or to understand what are the basic qualifications, or what are the basic things that need to be done when you are selecting an internal complaints committee in your office. So the this side will also some kind of awareness will be required from the side of the judiciary as well. Now, while handling cases in sexual harassments, one thing is very prominent, is that the local authorities, like the labor commissioners or the assistant labor commissioners, who are actually supposed to handle complaints related to sexual harassment. All these authorities, a lot of my clients come and tell me that we have spoken to the labor commissioner, but he says that this is something which is not in his purview, you can say. So all these things are not true. They need to understand the gravity and seriousness of the situation, and hence an awareness and sensitization from their side is also necessary. Now, I hope that in the next 40 to 45 odd minutes, I'm able to take you through the various facets of sexual harassment, and would also be able to advise you that what are the tips uh, or what are the things that need to be done from your side to make sure that when a sexual harassment incident happens in your workplace, the incident is properly highlighted, the incident is properly documented, and the investigation is done very properly. Now, before we go more deeper into this webinar, let me start by asking you a few very important questions. Now, these questions, they might be a little irrelevant to you, but for me, to my topic today, these questions are very important and they are very relevant. My first question to you is, how many people, while actually they are working in a company, have read the prevention of sexual harassment policy at your workplace? My second question, how many people before joining a company at the time of the interview, how many people actually ask the HR that does your company have an internal complaints mechanism to handle incidences of sexual harassment, or is your company compliant with the sexual harassment laws prevalent in India? My third question, how many of you who are working in companies have actually seen the names and contact details of the internal complaint committee members which are displayed at a very visible place in the workplace? How many of you have actually signed the sexual harassment policy at the time of signing the offer letter? Friends, let me tell you that as far as the best of my knowledge goes, I would like to tell you that first, most of the answers to the questions that I asked you are going to be a big no. And that is when I come to the part of creating an awareness and sensitization from all the sides, wherein it will be, acting as a catalyst to create a safe and secure working environment. Now, first of all, let us try to understand that what is the concept of a workplace. Now, as per the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, workplace means any corporate company, any hospital, any sort of tuition classes, any types of schools, any types of colleges. All these organizations come into the foray of a workplace. Now, to understand what is sexual harassment, it is very necessary for us to first of all understand that what are the basic elements of sexual harassment. So, let us start by discussing what are the acts or what are the actions or what behavior constitutes sexual harassment of a woman at workplace. So the Section 2N of the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act defines certain actions and behaviors that constitute sexual harassment of a woman at workplace. They are physical advances and contacts. So this means any type of unwanted touching, any one type of hugging, trying to kiss a girl, this will all come into the foray of physical contacts and advances. Basically, sexual harassment is anything that makes a woman feel uncomfortable at her workplace. Second act or action that constitutes sexual harassment is demand or request for sexual favors. Any sort of direct or even indirect request for sexual favors, or any sort of indirect hints that okay, no one is at my place, why don't you come home and we will have a good time. Even all these things will constitute a sexual harassment of a woman at workplace if that what makes her feel uncomfortable. Making sexually colored remarks. Now, calling anyone names or passing any derogatory or vulgar comments on the skin tone of a particular person, which he has actually no control of, that also comes into the foray of sexual harassment. So, calling someone dark skinned, calling someone like remarks that reflect that their physical features in a bad manner, that will also come into the foray of sexual harassment. There is then showing any sort of pornography to a female employee, that also constitutes sexual harassment. And the fifth part is any other physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature would come into the foray of sexual harassment. Now, it may be very interesting for you to know that, what are the companies basically doing to address and protect the woman from any incidents of sexual harassment. So let me tell you that now it is mandatory for every employer to formulate and constitute an internal complaints mechanism called the Internal Complaints Committee for addressing any sexual harassment complaints arising in the said workplace. A very important compliance that needs to be followed by these companies is that, suppose if they have offices situated at different districts or different states in India, such committee needs to be set up at every head office at that district or that particular state level, which means that if a company has offices in Mumbai and one office in Bangalore, then the internal complaints committee should be set up in both the locations. That is also in Mumbai and also in Bangalore. Now, who should be a part of this internal complaints committee? Now, let me tell you that the internal complaints committee starts with the presiding officer. Now, this presiding officer shall be a woman who is employed at a very senior position in that particular office. The presiding officer shall head the internal complaints committee and shall lead the functioning of the committee. Now, one of the mandatory, factor is that the woman should be employed at an administrative or at a managerial position. So, any woman who is the director, manager, senior director, or even a CEO, even if the woman is a CEO, she has the right to become the presiding officer of that particular internal complaints committee. Now, coming to the other part is there are two more members required amongst the employees, preferably women who have been working with issues related to women development or women empowerment, or have experience in any sort of social work, or who have any sort of legal experience or legal background. That kind of women will be a part of the members of the internal complaints committee. Now, the third and foremost important part in the internal complaints committee is that there should be one member from amongst the non-governmental organizations that are committed to the cause of a woman, or persons who are familiar with the laws prevalent about sexual harassment in India. Now, friends, let me tell you that the external member is the most important member in the internal complaints committee. Now, why this member is important, you may ask me. So, one of the important factors or one of the motives of this act was to ensure that every woman has a safe and secure working environment. Now, when most of the committee members are from the internal office, or are from the managerial role or from the administrative role, then there are definite possibilities that this particular committee might get biased. So, in order to ensure the fairness and unbiasedness of the committee, an external third party member who's from an NGO who's related towards the cause of women will be selected and will be a part of this particular committee. Some of the conditions for or some of the reasons that an external member is always appointed is because they want the entire functioning of the particular committee in a unbiased and in a fair manner. Also, friends, try to understand that the internal complaints committee, the external member in the internal complaints committee, she has experience, working with issues related to women, or she's aware about the laws that are prevalent for sexual harassment in India. So she is actually acting as a subject matter expert who can also guide, the internal members of the committee to actually go ahead and come up to a wise and fair decision. So, just to take a synopsis of the member, of the internal complaints committee. First one would be the presiding officer, who shall be the CEO, director, manager, any woman who's at a senior level in that particular company. Then there will be two more members amongst the employees who are preferably committed to the cause of women, or who have had experience in social work, or who have some sort of legal background. So even a lawyer would do. And the third most important member would be the external member from the NGO, who has been working with women, and have been resolving women issues, and who has knowledge about sexual harassment issues that are prevalent in workplace. Now a lot of people they come and ask me that, okay, can male members be a part of the internal complaints committee? So, friends, let me clear the air by saying that yes, male members can be a part of the internal complaints committee. However, at least one half of the total members of the ICC shall be women. Friends, remember that, as I said, the motive was of the act was to ensure that a harassment-free environment is given to every woman. So, in furtherance of this, motive, they have always been made it mandatory to make sure that there are basically more women in the internal complaints mechanism, because who other than the other woman can understand the plight of another woman, and that is the reason they have actually added more women members who can, wherein a woman will feel more comfortable in discussing her issues. So again, when we come to the other part of the this is that what is that the government is doing from their side to go ahead and ensure that a sexual harassment free environment is given to any woman in any workplace in India. So let me tell you that the local complaints committee is set up by the government at every district level, and hence it is mandatory for every district to have a local complaints committee. The district magistrate or the additional district magistrate, the collector or the deputy collector shall be called the district officer, and it is the duty of every district officer to carry out the functions under this act, and also set up a local complaints committee. Now, again, let us talk about what is the composition of a local complaints committee. Now, the local complaints committee shall be headed by the chairperson. Now, the chairperson should lead all the functionings of this committee. The mandatory factor is that the chairperson shall be a woman who is doing a social work, or which is dedicated to the cause of women. So they, in the act it says eminent women. So eminent social workers, or people who have their own NGOs, or who are committed towards the cause of women, such people can become the chairperson. Now there will be one member that will be nominated from amongst the women who are working in that particular block, who are working in that particular taluka, or who are working in that particular tehsil or ward, or for that matter the municipality of that district. Now, there are again two more members, of whom at least one shall be woman, who shall be nominated from such non governmental organizations or associations who are again committed to the cause of women, or a person who's familiar with issues relating to sexual harassment at workplace. Now, one of the very mandatory factors over here is that at least one of the member should have some kind of background or some kind of knowledge about the legalities of this particular matter. Now, again, if you see one similarity between the internal complaints committee and the local complaints committee is that they have always given dominance, or they have always kept an external member in that particular committee. The role of the external member is to make sure that an unbiased and unbiased, and you can say a proper free and fair investigation should take place in the matter, and the justice to the aggrieved movement needs to be granted. Now, if you also see that the government or the internal complaints mechanism, they have kept this external member so that they can get guidance from these members, because they act as a subject matter expert in issues relating to sexual harassment at workplace. Now, a very important thing that comes in this webinar is that how does or what is the procedure, what is the timeline, or how does an actual woman make a complaint with the necessary authorities. To start with this topic, first of all, let me tell you, most of the cases that I have handled, most of the aggrieved women have actually made a complaint to the HR department. Friends, let me tell you that this complaint should not go to the HR department. It should directly go to the internal complaints committee that is set up in your office. Now, as I said, how does a woman make a complaint? Any aggrieved woman who has faced a sexual harassment incident can make a complaint to the ICC or the LCC within 3 months from the date of the last sexual harassment incidents. Now, friends, why they have given you a time period of 3 months is because that there are cases when there are 7, 8 incidences happening, and sometimes in the first or second incident, the woman does not muster up the courage to actually go ahead and make a complaint. So, if these things try to get out of hand, or if this matter expedites, there should be some form of protection that should be given to the aggrieved movement, so that even the incidences that have happened before 3 months can come as a part and parcel of this complaint. And any assistance as to file the complaint, any assistance as to even draft the complaint shall be provided by the ICC or the LCC. If they do not provide you this sort of an assistance, it is a gross violations of the provisions of this act. Now, another important point that you should always look at, what the complaint should basically cover. So, in many incidences that or many cases that we have undertook, we have seen that the male counterpart against whom the complaint has been done, he goes out scot free because a lot of the important details in the complaint have not been mentioned. Details such as the date, such as the time, such as the place of occurrence, if there are any sort of witnesses, if there are any sort of evidences, all these important details have not been mentioned in the complaint, due to which the complaint becomes weak and justice becomes difficult in such cases. Therefore, in the interest of justice, I would like to tell you that it is very important that you make, a proper submission about the dates, the actual facts and circumstances of the case, a detailed description. When did this happen? What was the date? What was the place? If there are any witnesses, if there is any sort of evidence, maybe evidence in the form of letters, emails, videos, call recordings, any sort of evidences in this form should also be a part of this particular complaint. Because if these are not a part of this complaint and you reveal it later on, the opposition or the defense might come up with an excuse that this party was somewhere a party to this sexual harassment and whatever happened was mutual, and whatever she's submitting now is an afterthought. So please make sure that in order to make your complaint strong, the dates, the witnesses, the places, everything in detail has been given. Now let me come up to the part when how is the inquiry and investigation procedure carried out. First of all, whenever the internal complaints committee actually receives any sort of complaint in a written form, they have to mandatorily initiate an inquiry after looking at the complaint. A show cause notice to the male counterpart against whom such complaint has been made. A show cause notice needs to be given to him so that he can reply back by explaining his side of the story. Now, a very important factor to understand here, friends, is that this ICC and LCC is a very important committee because they have been vested with the powers of a civil court. So, powers such as summoning and enforcing the attendance of any person and examining him on an oath is under the purview of the ICC or the LCC. So even if they want the discovery and production of any important documents related to the case, they have the right to ask the production of such documents. Another important thing that is very necessary at the time of the investigation process is giving an opportunity of being heard to the respondent, which includes taking his statement and reply on the complaint and taking on record the evidence and proofs given by him. It also is very mandatory that giving an opportunity of to the respondent to know and submit his response to the evidence given by the aggrieved woman is also necessary, because friends, all these rights that have been vested with the internal complaints committee, these are all in line with the principles of natural justice. It is imperative for the other party to be given an opportunity to submit his side of the story. It is mandatory, it is in the interest of the principles of justice to allow the male counterpart to submit any sort of evidences. To he's also entitled to know that what sort of evidences are submitted against him, so that he can give an explanation on that as well. So when a complete inquiry, when a full-fledged investigation is carried out, that is when you can say that the functioning of the ICC or the LCC is in accordance with the provisions of this act. Now, to tell you certain factual things, I would like to tell you that I was one of the external members in one of the internal complaints committee, as a legal consultant, as a member of that particular committee. Let me tell you that in that particular committee, the presiding officer was a relative of the owner, who was also working at a very high position or a senior level at that particular company. Now, in a case like that, what particularly happens is that that particular committee was functioning as per the whims and fancies of that particular presiding officer, which is again a gross violation, that when biasness seeps in, then there is no use, or the motive of having a harassment free environment goes for a toss, because lot of cases used to come to that particular presiding officer, and based on the decision, or the discussion with her with the owners, she used to handle the complaints like that. So a complaint was initiated in the court of law against her, and the entire ICC committee had to be dismissed. Now, why investigation and inquiry is necessary, I would also like to discuss a very important a case that happened with me. So this happened when I was actually giving a webinar on the internal complaints committee in one of the MNCs in Mumbai. After the webinar, one woman came to me and said, "Sir, I am actually resigning from this company because I am not getting the kind of justice that I deserve, and I'm a victim of sexual harassment at workplace." When I called her to the office, I asked her that exactly what happened and what sort of steps have you taken to, first of all, ensure that a complaint against this matter has been registered. So she started crying and she told me that, "Sir, all the procedures have been done. The complaint has been filed. It has been given to the internal complaints committee. Her boss is harassing her by sending her emails. And when this matter was taken in front of the committee, the boss said and gave a self declaring affidavit that the email address does not belong to him." Now, as I have some background about cyber security. I said that I should be taking up this matter and try to secure justice for this particular woman. So I took up this matter on emotional grounds and I started the investigation. When we started the investigation, we came to know that the email has been generated from the vicinity of that particular office. Now, after digging a little deep, after doing some more forensics on the account, we came to know that this is actually a woman employee working in the same team, who is actually jealous of her progress and her promotions in office, and just to mentally harass her, she has been doing such kind of malicious activities to basically make her leave the job. I hope the kind of point I'm trying to make here, you are in line with me. I'm not trying to create an atmosphere of fear, but again, it is my moral responsibility to ensure that the correct facts or the real scenarios or the real time things that are happening in this world are put up in front of you. Now, when the investigation and inquiry is going on, what will be the procedure after the completion of the inquiry? First of all, this inquiry and investigation should be completed within a time frame of 90 days. A detailed report of the findings of the investigation shall be submitted by to the employer by the internal complaints committee and the district officer if the investigation has been carried out by the local complaints committee. Now, a copy of the report shall be given to the woman as well as the person against whom such complaint is made, and such report shall be submitted within a time frame of 10 days to the employer or the district officer as the case may be investigated. Now, what are the duties of the employer and district officer after receiving the investigation report? Now, there are total three parts in this. Let us start with part A. Part A is when no sexual harassment is deduced after the investigation. So, when the ICC or the LCC comes to a conclusion that no sexual harassment has taken place, the ICC or the LCC shall mention the same very clearly in that report and send a detailed report to the employer or the district officer recommending that no action needs to be taken, and the male counterpart against whom such complaint is made shall be acquitted of all the charges. Now let's come to part B. In part B, there are also cases wherein a false or a malicious complaint is filed against the male counterpart. So in the inquiry and investigation, when the ICC finds out that the complaint is malicious, then again it shall make a detailed report citing the reasons for which this particular complaint is malicious and send this recommendation report to the employer or the district officer. Friends, let me also remind you that if a false complaint has been deduced or found out that this complaint is malicious and based on false ground, then a disciplinary action can be taken against the woman, which includes termination and prosecution under the relevant sections of the Indian Penal Code. Now, let us come to the part C when the complaint is proved and the person is found to be guilty. So, when the ICC or the NCC concludes that the complaint is true and sexual harassment has been taken place, then it may order the employer or the district officer to, first of all, terminate the employee and also prosecute him under the relevant sections of sexual harassment and the Indian Penal Code. Also, a monetary compensation might be ordered from the salary or the wages of the male counterpart to the tune of the damages suffered by the aggrieved woman. Now, to decide the monetary compensation, always factors such as the mental trauma, the harassment, the loss of reputation that has caused to women, that has caused to a particular woman, all these clauses will be taken into consideration when the monetary compensation is ordered. So what happens if the employee does not pay the compensation? Then in that case, the this entire, if the respondent or the aggrieved male counterpart fails to pay the sum as referred to or as directed by the internal complaints committee or the local complaints committee, they may forward the same to be recovered as an arrear of land revenue, and the case shall be forwarded to the district officer. Now, friends, let me also tell you that if a particular woman is not happy about the way the inquiry of investigation was carried out, or if she is not happy with the recommendations or the report that is submitted by the respective committee, then she can make an appeal within 90 days to the labor commissioner of her particular area. Also, if the male counterpart feels that this complaint has been malicious and the committee has been biased against him and an unnecessary action has been taken against him, this right of appeal is available to the male counterpart also. Now, friends, I would also like to discuss that this act definitely talks about the composition of the committee. This act definitely talks about, how what would be the member, how who would be the members of the committee, how would be the investigation happening, how would be the inquiry happening. But unfortunately, the act is not able to tell us that what are the steps that need to be taken if the internal complaints committee is not functional. So, friends, let me go ahead and clear this air that at any part of the investigation, at any stage, any part of the investigation, or at any stage of the case, you feel that the committee is becoming biased and the committee is not able to secure proper justice, you have the right to make a complaint against the ICC committee to either the local complaints committee or directly to the district officer. Because if the complaint is not done at the right point of time, the entire flow of investigation will go for a toss, and at the end an aggrieved woman will nothing but be victimized about the incidents of sexual harassment that has occurred with her. So if you have any sort of complaints regarding the internal complaints committee, you can always go ahead and make this up with the local complaints committee. Now, there are cases, there are scenarios when, you have problems with the local complaints committee. Then what do you do? So, in such cases, when there are problems with the functioning of the local complaints committee, you can directly make a written complaint with the district officer. Again, while you make the complaint, please make sure that all the facts and circumstances and all the points that on which you believe that this committee is not functioning properly, any sort of evidences, any sort of witnesses, that you have against the committee, please go ahead and make it a part of your complaint, because the stronger the complaint, the stronger are the chances that justice is secured to an aggrieved party. Because first of all, let me go ahead and make this statement that your safety absolutely is in your hands. You cannot, give the onus or the burden of proof to anybody for not functioning properly if you have not taken the proper corroborative action against against the functioning of that particular person or against that particular committee. Now, as per the Sexual Harassment Act at workplace, there is also a section that talks about the conciliation of the matter. Friends, let me remind you that any request for conciliation should only and only come from the aggrieved woman. To give you an example of a case that I was handling is that one of the presiding officers who was taking care of the functioning of the internal complaints committee, a complaint against harassment, a boy working in that particular office was kind of stalking that woman, sending her messages as he was at a managerial position in that particular office and the lady was his junior. So in this particular complaint, what happened is that after she made a complaint, it was the presiding officer who suggested that some a conciliation can be reached out, and without she having the authority, she went to the woman and said कि अरे उसने इतना सब किया बट उसके बाद उसने आके सॉरी बोला, तो आप उसको छोड़ क्यों नहीं देते? आपका करियर खराब हो जाएगा, आप आगे आपको जॉब नहीं मिलेगा. If such threatening things have been done by the presiding officer of that complete committee, then this is a gross violation of this act. And finally, we took this matter to the local complaints committee and the district officer, and a strict disciplinary action was taken against that particular presiding officer. So do make sure that, and one more thing that I would also like to say is that any sort of communication that you have with the internal complaints committee or the local complaints committee, that should always be in writing, that should always be on papers. any verbal submissions might be forgotten at the time of giving the decision, and on that particular time you might lose the case. Now there are also certain things that need to be done from the employer side to make sure and to ensure that a harassment free workplace is granted to that particular woman. So first of all, the act says that it is mandatory for every employer to provide a safe and sound working environment for every woman. It is mandatory to constitute an internal complaints committee for managing and handling sexual harassment complaints. It is mandatory for every employer to display at a very conspicuous place in the workplace the penal consequences of sexual harassment. One of the latest amendments that have come in the companies, at the time of filing your application with the registrar of companies, at the time of registration of your companies, is that it is mandatory that every company puts in a statement in the application that is made to the registrar of companies that this particular workplace is compliant with all the sexual harassment laws prevalent in India. They are aware of the penal consequences. They have a internal complaints committee. They have a sexual harassment policy. All these things are mandatory to be mentioned in the application made at the time of registering your company with the registrar of companies. So it is also mandatory to display at a conspicuous place the names and contact details of the internal complaints committee, so that any woman who's aggrieved or who has faced a sexual harassment incident, such complaints can be, the aggrieved party or the aggrieved woman can actually go ahead and contact the committee. Every investigation procedure, every inquiry procedure, or all the meetings that are conducted should always be kept confidential and shall not be discussed at any cost with any other person other than the members of the internal complaints committee. One more thing that is very necessary, that every employer should organize workshops and awareness programs at regular intervals for sensitizing the employees with the provisions of the acts, to educate them, to help them understand that what are the legal provisions, what are the rights, what are the procedures that need to be followed, what are the facilities provided by this particular act to ensure that no sexual harassment ever takes place in any working environment. Now, another important part is that it is the responsibility of the company to carry out orientation programs for the internal complaints committee. So, friends, if you see all these provisions, one thing that you would come to know, that they have made it very mandatory or very necessary for every employer to constitute this internal complaints mechanism. Few key points or few takeaways of this particular internal complaints mechanism is that it should be always be unbiased. It should not be favoring the interest of the accused. It should be, the investigation should be fair. Even the internal complaints committee has been mandated to attend orientation programs, because if you see right now, most of the crimes are happening in the form of digital media. So it is very necessary for the internal complaints committee to have a fair understanding of the investigation and inquiry procedures. They should know that if they are dealing with an email in the form of evidence, what are the things that are necessary to authenticate and validate that particular email. If any sort of digital evidence is given, they should be trained enough to first of all handle or appreciate any evidence that is given to them in the digital form. Also, a very important thing that needs to be done from the side of the employer is that if a woman wants to make a further complaint in the police station, then it is the duty of the internal complaints committee or the employer to provide assistance to the woman if she chooses to file a complaint relating to sexual harassment with the necessary police authorities. Now, in order to provide more protection to the woman, even the sections of Indian Penal Code will be applicable in this particular scenario. So sections like section 354, outraging the modesty of women, sections like section 509, wherein any act, word, or gesture affects the modesty of that particular woman, even that particular sections can be applied to on that particular offender, and it is the duty of the employer to assist that particular woman in going ahead and filing this particular complaint. So, to give you a short synopsis of the duties of the employer is: one is providing a safe working environment at the workplace, constituting an internal complaints committee for managing and handling sexual harassment complaints, displaying at a conspicuous place in the workplace the penal consequences of the Sexual Harassment Act, and also to make or display at a very conspicuous place the names and the contact details of the internal complaints committee. It is also mandatory to organize workshops and awareness programs for the employees, and not only from the side of the woman. It also makes the male counterpart basically understand that what actually constitutes sexual harassment. Because lot of the entrepreneurs, they come up to me and they tell me that even we are when we are going for a Friday night outing, it is we are really scared to call the woman of our office because we don't know what will be constituted as sexual harassment. So my only answer to them is that you do any activity, in simple terms, any activity, any act, any gesture that makes a woman feel uncomfortable will constitute as sexual harassment. And now also, if the employer contravenes any of the provisions of this particular act in ensuring that a woman gets a harassment free workplace, then he is liable for a fine of 50,000 rupees. So all these things have basically been done to first of all ensure that there is no harassment incidents that take place in the workplace. If you see the name of the act, it is Sexual Harassment at Workplace Prevention, Protection and Redressal. So by enacting this particular act, the government wants to first of all prevent any incidences of sexual harassment, protect any woman if any sexual harassment incidents takes place, and also it requires to have a redressal mechanism to address any issues pertaining to sexual harassment. Now, few of the latest things that I would like to tell you is that the Ministry of Women and Child Development have actually, started a portal by the name of shebox.nic.in. This particular portal allows you to directly file an online complaint against the sexual harassment incidents that has occurred with you. I will let you know the link again. It is Shebox, SHE box BOX, shebox.nic.in. Now a woman can directly file an online complaint with this particular portal. Please visit this portal because the government has given lot of manuals in the form of audios and videos and lot of material that explains the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act. It also gives you what are your rights and also helps you understand how are you legally protected under this particular act. Now, even when you make an online complaint, the rules of the game still remain the same. Please make sure that a detailed and a brief complaint is being made. Please do not forget to, mention the name, place, date, witnesses, evidences in verbal or digital form in that particular complaint. And someone from there, they also provide you legal assistance if you do not, if you are a aggrieved woman and if you want to go ahead and report any incidents related to sexual harassment. Now, I would also like to tell you that this particular act was fairly, enacted, and there was amendment in the year 2016, wherein the name of the Internal Complaints Committee was changed to Internal Committee. And I would also like to tell you that if there are any problems in the functioning of the Internal Complaints Committee, or the local complaints committee, a straight online complaint can be filed in that particular portal. Even additionally, you can make a complaint with the district officer as well. So all these rights are definitely being granted to you, and I think that awareness and sensitization plays a very important part, because you cannot make anyone else responsible for your own safety. As you protect your physical assets, it is also your duty to protect your modesty and integrity, which also falls into the gambit of your physical assets, and it also falls into the gambit of your physical and mental well being. So we have today almost discussed all the forays, all the provisions, all the important factors that are enacted to create and ensure that a safe and sound working environment is granted, and every woman is available to enjoy the what do you say? You can say a woman is free to enjoy the workplace and work according to her talent, and she is not being stripped out of her modesty or integrity by any male predator who's trying to take undue advantage of his position in office. Another thing that I would like to tell all the women is that please do not take any, even a small incidence of sexual harassment lightly, because if you take that thing lightly today, tomorrow it's going to grow like a cancer, and then taking a corrective action will be a difficult procedure in the future. So even a single incidence of sexual harassment should be immediately reported with the internal complaints committee. Also make sure, as I'm again and again emphasizing on this point, that it is very necessary to ensure that a detailed complaint is being drafted, otherwise the case will not stand in the future. One more thing that we can also deduce from this today's conversation is that there are a lot of provisions that put the onus on the employers to ensure that a safe and working environment is basically provided to every woman working in India. And since we are coming to the end of this particular webinar, I would like to make a humble request to all the women who are, going to be working or who are working with companies located in India. My request to all the female employee is that please ensure that the company that you are joining has a sexual harassment at workplace policy drafted, and the policy is being framed and is in use. Please ensure that when you are signing the offer letter, please ask the human resource department whether you have an internal complaints mechanism. Most of us are always concerned on my job role, on your salary, and everyone forgets the most important asset, which is your integrity and your modesty. So women employees, or women who are being a part of this forum, I would request them to ensure that there is a sexual harassment policy that is drafted for your particular workplace. You have to make sure that the names and contact details of the internal complaints committee members are displayed at a visible place in the workplace. This will not only help you, but it will also help people or women who are facing sexual harassment to come up and discuss the matter with the relevant subject matter experts in that particular matter. So once again, I would like to conclude the session by saying that you are responsible for your own safety. You have to ensure that all these things are always in place and in compliance with that particular order. By saying that, I would like to conclude this particular session, and I would also like to take some questions, if any, from the audience. So let me just see if there are any sort of questions that are a part of this particular forum. Just a minute. Okay, it's a very good question. Masweta Basu asks me that isn't it a female centric issue then? Then yes, first of all, let me tell you, Mahashweta, that if you read the Indian Penal Code, there are 511 sections that are in favor, or that are designed for men and women in equal. But there are only two to three sections in that entire IPC that are dedicated towards women. One is section 354 of the IPC, and one is 509, and the third one is cruelty, that is section 498A. So there are only two sections who are actually protecting the integrity and modesty of a woman. And if any such incidents happens against the male, he can prosecute the female with the other sections like criminal conspiracy, criminal breach of trust, intimidation. All these sections are definitely applicable to the male. So yes, this basic motto of this particular act was to ensure the safety of this woman, and this act is a female centric act. Let me go on to the next question. Uh, Interesting. Survi Pal asks me that, sir, if the employee himself is involved in sexual harassment, then whom will the report be submitted? So, Survi, as I said, that even if it is the employer who's involved in an activity of sexual harassment towards his female employee, that is the reason an internal complaints committee is constituted. So the internal complaints committee is competent to handle even the complaints that are against the employer himself. And if the committee is not taking any action, then as I said in my webinar, you can always go ahead and make the complaint to the local complaints committee or the district officer. Because in every district, either the district magistrate, the additional district magistrate, the collector, or the additional collector are district officers, and straight away you can go ahead and make a complaint over there. One more question that I can see is, what if the lady was in a managerial position and the junior was a male? Again, as I said, this act is particularly for the female employees who are facing sexual harassment. If a male feels that he is being sexually harassed by a female boss, then he has the right to invoke the provisions under the Indian Penal Code and ensure that a proper complaint is registered against that particular female boss. Okay. What if the legal provisions committing what if the legal professionals are committing this offense? Let me say, same kind of action needs to be taken, because even law firms, if your person is particularly working in a law firm, even that law firm comes under the definition of workplace, and the internal complaints committee needs to be constituted under for that particular law firm also. Let me see if there are any other questions. Okay. Is there any e-certificate available for the participants? Yes. Manish will get in touch with you for that. You can get in touch with Manish. All right. So that comes we come to the end of this session, and I hope you have gained some insights, and I am able to guide you or to take you through the various facets of sexual harassment, and I've been also been able to tell you that how to save yourself from the dark clutches of the male predators from your office. Few things once again I would like to repeat, that please ensure that before you join any company, that you check if there is an internal complaints mechanism. Don't only be concerned about your salary and your job roles, because your integrity is more important than all these other factors. So make sure that you remain safe, and let me tell you that your safety is in your hands. Thank you all for your wonderful time, and I hope to meet you again with some more interesting webinars. And with and let me come an inch closer to my mission of educating you and making all the Indian workplaces a safe and secure ones for the women employees. Thanks a lot once again. Good night and take care.